Morning. We're working our way through Mark's Gospel, chapter 2, verses 23 to 28 this week. We're looking really at the idea of Sabbath observance and how Jesus regarded it and what we can learn from that for ourselves today. But it's Wednesday, so you know what I'm going to say. I'm going to encourage you to think about being at our prayer meeting this evening. 7:30 usually finishes by 8:30, so it's not going to take up your evening, but it's a wonderful time for us to draw aside and just to take that time to be together, albeit on a Zoom meeting, which we're very thankful we're able to do, but take time to be together and to pray for each other and to pray for you. If you've something you would need prayer for or would appreciate prayer for, please get in touch and let us know so we can be praying for you as well. But I would love to see you there tonight, and it's always encouraging to see the odd new face coming in from time to time. Anyway, on to the reading this morning. Jesus' disciples have been walking with him through a field where there are ears growing, ears of corn growing, ears of grain growing, we're not sure, probably wheat of some sort. And as they're walking, they're breaking the Sabbath rule, because the Sabbath rule said you could really only walk approximately about 800 meters or so on a Sabbath day. And as they walked, they were pulling the ears of corn, the ears of wheat, and most likely chewing on them in some way. I'm not quite sure how that works. I've never tried it myself. I prefer my Weetabix in the morning. But anyway, they were doing a number of things that were wrong. First of all, the Sabbath, the rules about the Sabbath affected human beings, male and female, differently. It affected animals, what animals could do and what you could do with an animal on a Sunday or a Sabbath. It also actually, believe it or not, affected what you could do with plants on a Sabbath day. You weren't allowed to cut them. You weren't allowed to harvest them in any way. You weren't allowed to basically do anything that would affect how the plant existed on a Sunday or a Sabbath. And so there's this problem these disciples are walking through, and as they walk through, they're pulling the grain and they're chewing the grain, they're eating the grain. And it's not as if they're actually feasting on it. It's not as if they're actually using this as a replacement for a meal. But it's just almost as if they're just doing it as they happen to be going through the field, as they're talking to each other, they're walking, they're pulling off the odd bit of grain and putting it in their mouth and eating it. It's not as if they're saying, oh, we're so hungry, we're going to die if we don't eat this grain. But there was a sense of that they were just casually doing it as they were walking through the field. And so they were breaking several of the rules, the laws that were written to basically keep the Sabbath day a very different day. And they were picked upon by the Pharisees, who weren't happy about this, although the Pharisees for some reason didn't mention the journeying or the traveling. But they were basically picked upon for this harvesting and eating. And Jesus basically, instead of him having the argument with them and trying to logically argue it through, Jesus basically goes back to an Old Testament incident where David and his men were very, very hungry, and they went into the temple. They went into this area where the bread was left there as part of an offering that only the priests were allowed to eat. And they actually encouraged the priest to give them the bread, and the priest gave them the bread, and then they ate the bread. And this all happened on the Sabbath day. And it's interesting that the Pharisees aren't pointing the finger at the priests in the story, but they would always have looked at David. And what Jesus is saying is, look, you know the story about David. David did this. David was involved in this. David took the bread when he shouldn't have taken the bread according to your law. He gave it to his men, and his men ate it because they were hungry. And what Jesus was basically saying is, not you never condemned him, but he's saying you, in understanding that, need to understand that what David was setting was a precedent. He was basically saying, this is how David did things. It was a Sabbath, but David did this. It was still okay. And you, as the Jewish people, have held David up so high for so many years, and yet you've never condemned him for this. And if it was good enough for David, then it's good enough for me and for my disciples. And there's this wonderful picture going on in the background here, which I'm still not sure how much the Pharisees knew about who Jesus claimed to be, or how they were trying to work out who he was. There was this question of the Messiah hanging over him. And we know that the Messiah was going to be a descendant from David. We thought about that when we did Ruth back in the summer. A descendant of David, but also he was going to be higher than David because he was David's Lord. And there's this sense that if it was okay for David to do this, and you don't have a problem with that, then why can't I do it? And so if David set the precedent, then Jesus is basically saying, I am the Messiah. I am the descendant of David. He set the example. I am following it. So what's your problem? And there's this theological issue going on in the background about the Pharisees trying to understand who Jesus is, and Jesus not wanting to come out and say it blatantly and openly because of the issues that would cause. And so there's a sense of, you need to work this out, man. You need to work out what's going on here. You need to work out what happened with David. You need to work out who I am. Marry the two together and you'll understand why I don't have a problem if my disciples pull the odd head of grain and eat it. A wonderful thing going on here, but Jesus is basically saying Scripture testifies to who I am. I am the Messiah, and you need to understand that. And so we need to get a proper understanding of who Jesus is. We think we maybe understand him, but we really need to read our Bibles. We need to read beyond the pages there. We need to get commentaries out. We need to read good books that help us understand the books of the Bible. Simply for no other reason, not to become more educated, but to understand more about who Jesus is. Because who he is the person that we want to have that relationship with, and he wants to have that relationship with us. Wonderful story, this, but it's important to read behind the scenes as well. Anyway, I hope it hasn't been too much and you haven't choked on it this morning, and you enjoy your Weetabix if you haven't had it already. We'll see you, God willing, tonight at the prayer meeting. If not, tomorrow morning, I'll be back here again Thursday morning. God bless.